Trunks' ultra ego, the pride that remains through his son. Vegeta, in a new saga of the future generation, reveals ultra ego to the boys, and both decide to follow in their father's footsteps, one being ultra instinct and the other ultra ego, and thus the most powerful warrior of all may arise, Gotenks, in a completely hybrid form. Want to know how Trunks will actually access this form and why? Then stay tuned for the video and make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell. The focus on the boys Goten and Trunks is more intense than ever. And it's no coincidence. For the first time in a long time, the Dragon Ball universe is truly looking at the new generation. It's no longer just about promises. Unprecedented transformations appear before their eyes, and the potential for assimilation in these two proves to be absurd. But now, the focus shifts to something even more radical. What if Trunks, who is walking a more aggressive, more visceral path, the same one that led Vegeta to challenge the gods themselves? Yes, my friends, it's time to see Trunks awaken Ultra Ego. And I'll explain how this will happen, how everything around him was, silently, pushing the boy in this direction. Back at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, the focus on Gohan raised debates on whether he would follow in his father's footsteps. We saw that he didn't. Gohan followed his own path, alternating between moments of glory and distancing himself from combat. Meanwhile, Goten was born after the darkest period on Earth, with a natural talent and more S-cells than anyone from his generation. He accessed Super Saiyan with ease, even before his older brother, and alongside Trunks, reached Super Saiyan 3 in the fusion, something even Vegeta hadn't done. Of course, if we take into account the Trunks from the future, he could hardly carry this energy, but with Trunks' mastery, he could easily learn without being corrupted, just like Top. The difference between the present Trunks and the future Trunks is profound and goes far beyond physical changes or appearance. From the moment both characters are introduced in Dragon Ball Z, their paths diverge in very distinct ways, shaped by the circumstances they face. To begin with, the Trunks from the future was born in a world devastated by destruction, where androids 17 and 18 had wiped out much of Earth's population. In this scenario, he didn't have the peaceful childhood that the present Trunks experienced. Without the constant presence of Goku, who had already passed away due to illness, and with the death of his father, Vegeta, Trunks was forced to grow up quickly, becoming, in many ways, the last bastion of hope for a world that seemed on the brink of extinction. This reality imposed on the future Trunks shaped him in a unique way. Unlike his counterpart in the present, he had no time for leisure or the innocence that usually accompanied childhood. His life was full of battles, loneliness, and responsibility. The pain of loss, whether the death of his mother, Bulma, or the death of Gohan, who had taken on the role of a father figure for him, was a constant in his life. This Trunks didn't have the possibility to be an easygoing kid. He was, above all, a warrior who lived a life marked by resistance and the daily fight for survival. The seriousness and maturity he displayed, even in his youth, were the fruits of the brutality of the world he lived in. He knew what it meant to lose, but he also knew what it meant to fight until the end, even when hope seemed lost. Meanwhile, the present Trunks grew up in a very different environment. Although he experienced battles and even fought great enemies like Frieza and Majin Buu, he always had the comfort and security provided by his parents, Vegeta and Bulma. He was never forced to grow up so quickly or deal with losses as devastating as the future Trunks had. Instead, he had the chance to train, evolve as a fighter, and of course, have fun. This Trunks, despite being extremely talented, is more impulsive and youthful, with a more optimistic view of the world, far from the emotional scars that marked the future Trunks. His confidence comes more from his natural potential and the education he received, not from the experience of a life of suffering. He is still a boy, and his view of life is often lighter, more willing to face challenges with humor and without the burden of responsibility that the future Trunks carried. And how would the future Trunks carry this burden of destruction energy, given that he abhors it with all his strength? The stark difference between the two is also reflected in the way they approach combat and fighting. The future Trunks is undoubtedly a more experienced fighter. He had to fight against powerful enemies for years, without the luxury of relying on the help of other warriors. This experience made him more of a strategist and a planner. Throughout his journey, he was forced to learn to fight alone, deal with resource limitations, and develop emotional and physical resilience that made him extremely skilled and determined. His fight against the androids 17 and 18, and the way he faced pain and loneliness forged him into an unbeatable warrior, capable of quickly adapting to any combat situation. The present Trunks, on the other hand, although extremely powerful and skilled, has not faced challenges as severe as the future Trunks. Although he has closely followed his father's training and battled alongside the Z fighters, he hasn't lived through a constant war and hasn't had the pressure of being Earth's only defender. His strength is immense, but it still mainly reflects continuous training and the Saiyan legacy, without the weight of experience in battles for survival. His potential is clear, but he still has much to learn about the true demands of war and responsibility. In the end, the future Trunks and present Trunks represent two sides of the same coin. The first is the personification of pain and survival, a warrior who had to grow up fast and learn to fight to save a dying world. The second, although still young, is already beginning to show the potential to become a great warrior, but without the weight of the tragedies that his future self carried. While the future Trunks is already a fully formed hero, the present Trunks is still in the making, ready to walk a path of greatness, but with the lightness and hope of someone who, still, can choose his destiny. Ultimately, he was also born powerful. The son of the Prince of the Saiyans and the smartest woman on the planet, Trunks inherited Bulma's genius and Vegeta's unyielding pride. It's different from Goten, who is lighter and more fluid. Trunks has always shown a more intense flame, more demanding, as if he wanted to prove something. Even in his childhood, his words were sharp, his attitude explosive. He always wanted to win, overcome, dominate. Even in games with Goten, it was him who wanted to be the strongest. Over time, this began to shape, and today, Trunks starts to awaken the same instinct for overcoming that led his father to Ultra Ego. The new saga brings these two back to the center of the narrative. Goten and Trunks, grown, formed in power and experience, are ready to stop being just the future. Now, they are the present. And while Goten walks with lightness and naturalness toward the state of intuition and absolute fluidity, Trunks begins to sink into a path that demands pain, overcoming, and desire. The path of Ultra Ego. Trunks, like Vegeta, has always had something to prove. Since he met Goku, his father was placed second. Since he saw his alternate self from the future, he felt the need to be more than just a modern version of a doomed warrior. He always wanted to carry the name of his lineage with pride. He doesn't just seek power. He wants to surpass, overcome, dominate. Ultra Ego is not a gift. It's not awakened in calm training or with spiritual balance. It is born in combat, in pain, in laughter in the face of death. It is fed by pride, forged in battle, and depends on the acceptance of one truth. The pleasure of the fight is the reward itself. Trunks, now older, begins to understand this. He no longer just wants to be strong for fun or games. He wants to test himself against the limits. And Ultra Ego demands exactly that. It is important to note that, although Trunks and Goten have always worked as an inseparable duo, they are completely distinct in their essence. Goten is flexible, observant, intuitive. Trunks is impulsive, stubborn, domineering. While Goten molds himself to the environment, Trunks wants to dominate it. And it's in this difference that they complete each other and strengthen as Gotenks. Gotenks, by the way, continues to be the link between the two, and perhaps the key for them both to reach the extremes of their potential. In the fusion, their natures balance each other. Trunks' boldness and Goten's lightness create a warrior who is unpredictable, creative, and absurdly powerful. But the most curious thing is that, despite Gotenks' irreverence, there's something pure in him, the absence of emotional barriers that Goku and Vegeta carry in their adult-fused forms. While Vegeta and Gogeta are warriors built with the weight of experience, Gotenks is light, spontaneous, chaotic. But what if one day, instead of simply replicating the techniques and styles of Goku and Vegeta, they started incorporating the evolutionary paths of both? One, the superior instinct. The other, Ultra Ego. What would happen to this fusion if each side specialized in a divine branch? Imagine this. Goten embodying the principles of autonomous body control, moving with intuitive precision, and Trunks activating the destructive essence of Ultra Ego, fueled by pride and the thirst for challenge. The fusion of two divine extremes. But focusing on Trunks, there's a very important point here. Unlike Goten, he knows that his father trains with Bills and Whis. He followed the stories, observed the transformations, and, unlike his father, grew up in a world where the gods of destruction were already a reality. Trunks doesn't need to wonder what's beyond Super Saiyan Blue. He saw it with his own eyes. Although in the Dragon Ball Super manga, Goten and Trunks do not directly witness Vegeta using the Ultra Ego form, the first time Vegeta uses this transformation is in the Granola the Survivor arc during the battle against Granola, where he fights alongside Goku. However, Goten and Trunks are not present for this confrontation. For now, they do not have direct knowledge of Vegeta's Ultra Ego. However, it's possible that in future issues or chapters, the two may hear about this transformation or perhaps even witness Vegeta using it if the plot shifts toward the next generation of Saiyans and their respective developments. A cool move would be for them to ask Vegeta if he can do it like Goku using superior instinct, and that's when he would show Trunks the Ultra Ego. You know what happens next. Just like when he was a child, easily replicating Super Saiyan, Trunks is primed to now begin absorbing the concept of Ultra Ego. Maybe unconsciously at first. Maybe his body, when cornered in real combat, begins to laugh in the face of danger. Perhaps the instinct to keep fighting, to rise even after severe wounds, begins to manifest differently. No longer just as determination, but as desire. The desire for more pain, more confrontation, more power. The pleasure of testing oneself. This is exactly what Whis explained to Vegeta. Ultra ego grows as the warrior surrenders to the fight, ignores pain, and advances. And Trunks, with his boiling blood and inherited pride, is perfectly positioned for this. He doesn't need the serenity of superior instinct. He needs the boldness to go to the end, even when everything seems lost. This transformation, however, doesn't come easy. Unlike superior instinct, which requires ego emptiness, ultra ego demands total surrender to the ego. But not just any ego, a conscious ego. One that knows who it is, understands its place in the world, and challenges it. Trunks has always had this within him, the childish arrogance that now transforms into refined ambition. In battle, he has already shown since his youth to be more aggressive than Goten. He was the one leading the attacks, the one suggesting the riskiest ideas. And if this was once seen as childish impulsiveness, it now becomes a sign of combat leadership. Trunks is starting to become a true prince of battle, a warrior who, unlike Goten, doesn't seek to flow. He seeks to dominate. So, when they fuse again, what will emerge? Gotenks, with one side vibrating in superior instinct and the other pulsing with ultra ego, could be the most unpredictable fusion in the entire franchise. Not just because of power, but because of the complexity. Imagine a fusion where half the body dodges by intuition and the other rushes forward to take a beating and grow. A dance between lightness and brutality. Maybe this is the next frontier of Dragon Ball. Not just the overcoming of individual limits, but the fusion of two opposing divine principles into one body. And perhaps Trunks, by embracing ultra ego, will do what Vegeta never could, maintain pride without sacrificing lightness, because his bond with Goten balances him. In this scenario, Goten and Trunks are no longer just the children of great warriors. They become the pillars of the new path, where the next generation creates not just new forms, but new ideas of power. Ultra ego in Trunks will not just be a transformation, it will be the reflection of a pride that has matured, a fire that has finally found its direction.